a player immediately, unconsciously responding with yes. And of course, the purpose of that is to sort of pull you into the idea that you're not playing a character in the game. It's you inside this experience. And of course, making it clear that the clinic itself is not necessarily the safest or most prestigious place to get treated creates an immediate tension, especially when the very first thing you do in the game is accidentally sign away all of your rights.
A lot of people ask about how the resizing mechanic works. The concepts are actually quite easy. To keep an object looking the same, assume if we move the object twice as far away, it just needs to be twice as big. It's all proportional. Interestingly enough, this also works no matter what field of view you use. The hard part of this mechanic isn't the actual resizing. It's trying to figure out where the object needs to be. To do this, you need to test a weirdly shaped object with a weirdly shaped background, and try to find the right ratio for the object to be big enough to not touch anything, while keeping everything accurate and optimized.
Terms of service accepted. Congratulations on falling asleep. Welcome to Somnasculpt. Your progress may be monitored by qualified specialists. This orientation will adapt you to eyelids, our interactive, lucid induction dream state in which you retain full consciousness and control.
Hey, this is Matt. I did the music and sound. This very first jazz piece in the game is called I Wonder, and if it sounds at all familiar to you, That's because you just heard its melody and chord progression in the Somnosculpt TV jingle back at the start of the game, which I called Smooth Wonder.
Hi, I'm Logan, and I'm level designer on Superliminal. A difference with the main resizing mechanic in this game is how much freedom it gives the player. This puzzle is a good example. In most puzzle games, if you put an object on a button in this scenario, the object doesn't need to be moved anymore. The key to unlock the door removes the key from the problem space. But unfortunately, in our game, you can just turn around and grab the object from any distance away. Therefore, we've gotten good at adding barriers in many places so people won't carry an object through all puzzles forever.
Confirmed. You can move freely, interact with surrounding objects, and listen to messages from your patient care team. Please note that I am the standard orientation protocol and that my voice has been explicitly chosen to remind you that I am not a part of your patient care team. I do not care.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I performed gameplay programming on Superliminal. When I joined the project, there weren't really any menus except the absolute bare minimum to get the player into the game, and there wasn't any keyboard support either. So the first order of business was to add proper mouse and keyboard support to the title and pause menus. The hardest part was supporting switching between the two on the fly, because you never know when the player is going to do it, and it could lock them out of the game. With that foundation laid, I started working on controller support. In terms of the menus, there wasn't much work to do. The pad basically acts like a keyboard. But gameplay was quite a different story. As we approached launch, we all agreed that controller support wasn't quite up to par, and so we shipped without it, adding it around a month after launch. To make controllers feel as good as mouse and keyboard, I wrote a bunch of code to modify how controller input is interpreted. For mouse and keyboard, input is more or less one-to-one mapped to player movement. So you move the mouse and the camera turns. But that doesn't feel good with controllers. Trying to pick up a very small object, say a chess piece, could be quite finicky. In the end, I made it so looking around accelerates the longer the stick is pressed, and behaves differently based on whether you are looking vertically or horizontally, and also while you are holding an object. Probably the biggest change was a quote-unquote auto-lock feature, which draws the focus to a grabbable object as your cursor gets closer to it. All these changes culminated in controllers feeling much more accurate and satisfying.
During eyelids, you will lose the ability to awaken suddenly due to realizing that this is a dream. Evidence: I have already informed you that this is a dream. You did not wake up. Please complete the remaining orientation activities.
There's quite a bit of foreshadowing throughout this level. We wanted to hint at the mechanics that are going to come later in the game. For example, the projection, the clone, and the portal hallways later on. Little things like that feel like visual treats when you're playing this level, but serve as fun reminders when you play for a second time that we kind of told you the whole thing all along.
Hi there, I'm Steve. I'm the art director of Superliminal. One of our main visual touchstones for this section centers around a couple of silly questions. What would someone in the early 90s dream up as a futuristic testing facility? And how could they build that on a shoestring budget but with infinite time? I feel like those two questions were ones we actually asked ourselves more than once during the process of making this game.
Warning: you have deviated from the orientation pathway. At the Pierce Institute, patient safety is a keynote in our corporate priority tetrahedron. A variable degree of force can and will be authorized to ensure patient safety. Please return to the orientation pathway.
When we were playtesting, we realized that players were getting tripped up on different aspects of the resize mechanic. So we tried to make each puzzle in this level teach a specific action. The cheese puzzle is our way of forcing players to make something from very small to very big, and the puzzle after that is the opposite. This broken window puzzle is to teach you how to make things small and fit through a hole, but at a distance, so you can't simply walk up to it.
All environments perceived during eyelids should reflect a typical mental state. If you believe your mental state was compromised by Somnasculpt, please provide a comprehensive, rational explanation in your post-procedural survey. Completed surveys may be eligible for a gift card.
We had this looping hallway for a while, but it was very nondescript and players got confused on where they were and they would get turned around. So our artist Steve helped mock up some windows and landmarks so people can tell where they are. Immediately, we found that playtesters weren't getting lost anymore and understood the moment. Our core game mechanic is so novel that we immediately drew comparisons to other quasi-sci-fi puzzle games. And since our game is about playing with and subverting expectations, we wanted to lean into that and start the first level with a kind of test chamber aesthetic and immediately break that going forward. Narratively, this space is what Dr. Pierce planned to have his dream therapy program look like before it all went wrong.
Please stand by for polite recognition on your completion of the Somnasculpt orientation. You did it. To maximize the time allotted for your therapeutic journey, please do not delay in proceeding through the final doorway as indicated.
The reason we ended up with this sleep clinic section is because we wanted to convince players that they might have actually woken up from the dream. So we don't have any dreamlike mechanics you can play with until you get to the vending machine. Later on, this becomes a hub you come back to in order to emphasize the feeling of waking up from a dream within a dream.
We want the first moment of people walking into this hallway to feel different from other first-person puzzle games. This hallway is designed to feel surprisingly warm, which helps make it feel a little bit surreal, and a little bit odd. Throughout the game, we're bouncing between these two feelings, the feelings of warmth and coldness.
So my brief for the jazz part of this soundtrack was always to do my best to emulate the iconic solo jazz piano sound of the great Bill Evans. For that, I listened to an album called Alone. My process was to try to compose my own superliminal jazz standards. I fleshed out the first chorus and melody. Later on, I workshopped and recorded with my good friend John Reeves. And I'm so glad I did, because his piano skills are so much better than mine.
blueprints are one of the secrets that we add to the game, and if you find them all, you'll unlock a special secret. The diagrams are actually top-down, wireframe views of parts of the levels, and they're blue.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce, and I'd like to talk to you about being special. So special, in fact, that we have no idea where you are. But not to worry, we're working on it.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and I was the principal artist on Superliminal. Optical's pink hotel hallway was the first area we nailed down visually and served as a starting point for how we approached the art for the rest of the game. We wanted enough decoration for it to be interesting to the player, yet it couldn't have too much visual noise, or else the player would get lost and overwhelmed. We made interactable objects the complementary color of the surrounding environment, which helped them pop more and feel more important. After we were happy with how this part of the game felt, the rest of the locales came together much quicker, and we required less iteration.
Hi, my name is Phil Fortier, and I was the graphics programmer on Superliminal, and I also worked on some of the Easter egg design. So one day, for whatever reason, I was looking up reference material for astral planes on the internet, And one of the results was the astral plane that appears in the TV show The OA. And at the same time, we were trying to figure out different optical illusions we could use for the Easter eggs that were different from the main gameplay. And the astral plane in the OA has stars and a reflective floor. And so that was kind of the inspiration for the star rooms here. And the goal for these was that they would be hidden in plain sight. So you could play through the game and not even notice them if you're not being careful and observant. But if you look around, then you might find one. The way we made the star rooms try to fit into the game narrative is that Dr. Pierce, while designing these dream levels, it's a lot of work, so occasionally he would need to take a break, just lie down, close his eyes, meditate a bit, and so he hid these star rooms in the levels that potentially only he could find. And it kind of reminded me, I've been to MoMA in New York once, and they had a relaxation room that was kind of dark, and people could lie on the ground and look up at, projected things on the walls. And that was kind of like the visual and thing I was going for.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce, and I'm just popping in to give you a quick update on where you are. We still don't know, but please keep moving forward, and hopefully you prefer frequent updates to being reminded that you are completely lost.
So in this warehouse, you'll notice that there are actually 4 exits to the room, and the level geometry on the other side of the exits would actually overlap if it existed in real space. So to make the level design a little easier, we used our portal tech here. So the exits to the room when you leave the room are actually in vastly different physical locations within the level, but hopefully it should be all seamless for the player.
Before you grab the moon in the next room, please notice that it looks quite far away. An interesting fact is that it actually isn't that far at all. But because the moon's position is moving with your position, it seems to be infinitely far away.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce, and we still can't find you. But you should now have access to a series of elevators that should trigger your subconscious to gradually wake you up. You should also find a variety of emergency exit signs that should lead you to them. Will all of this work? Absolutely.
This puzzle has the problem of requiring the room to not have a ceiling, which resulted with players wanting to escape the room. In a later update, we added a secret area above this room and a bunch of other secret areas based on where we saw players going.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce. In the event that this elevator does not wake you up, please don't interact with anything that strikes you as psychologically significant, as we will no longer have any way of controlling it. For example, if you see your parents, please punch them in the face as hard as you can and immediately run away.
This is an automated message for all patients who attempted to use an alternate pathway to access the next phase of Somnasculpt therapy but who have become trapped in a dream state paradox instead. Your decisions imply a failure of orientation, which reflects negatively on the standard orientation protocol. You will rectify this failure immediately.
So the standard orientation protocol character is obsessed with proper orientation, and that makes her kind of thematically antagonistic to the idea of truth being, intrinsically tied to perspective. But to me, the fun part of it was writing her as being cruel without there being any actual malice to it. Like, she has nothing against you personally. Her programming simply can't see beyond proper orientation as being the only thing of any value to a Somnasculpt patient whatsoever.
An early challenge we had for creating the art for Cubism was how to approach the space and make sense of it. We started taking it a bit too literally. For example, how could we make sense of the door being so high up? Why would it be built this way? The solution we arrived at was simply not to make sense of it, because it shouldn't. We created a simple museum aesthetic that wouldn't get in the player's way of experimenting with and enjoying the puzzles. Sometimes keeping it simple is the way to go.
Professional tip: the average adult can only withstand 3 to 5 dreams.
Between the
per night.
colorful dream spaces,
Once this
we have
threshold
these,
is eclipsed
what we
by
call
entry
back
or more
areas.
dreams, your mind
These
will
back
suffer
areas
an
serve as a
explosive
backdrop to
mental
everything.
overload, reorienting
They are where
you
the
for
dream spaces are
emergency
built,
exit protocol.
and also the service hallways
Please
in
subject
between them.
yourself to explosive
We wanted to
mental
give them a
overload.
colder, darker feel to contrast with other spaces in the game. But we also wanted to keep a man-made feel, as if people were just here moving things, creating these spaces, doing work a second before you arrived.
Yeah, it reminded me a little of Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York. That idea of building a world inside of another world.
Originally, we had little plaques indicating exhibits within the museum, but we felt it was a little bit too on the nose, so to speak. You are the main exhibit, So I imagine the players wandering around a game with an exhibit plaque hanging around their necks.
Please note that a reluctance to volunteer for the risks associated with explosive mental overload implies a misunderstanding of all other solutions, all of which are far more traumatic and likelier to result in catastrophe. I am not capable of suboptimal suggestions.
Not all of our interesting perspective moments can be built into puzzles. Some are just great moments that break your expectations. This level interprets a cube in multiple different ways, and even though none of these are difficult puzzles, they all work together to create a whole series of back-to-back surprise moments. It was fun finding the balance of making it feel like someone was messing with you, without making it feel like the cube is sentient.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce, and despite touring the Waterfall Serenity Zone in the previous section you've just completed, you may still be experiencing feelings of worthlessness and self-doubt. Why do I feel like everything is going wrong, even when the sun is shining?
This level came about because we explored the idea of the game being an anthology of different stories, one story for each level. This level was the horror level, and I immediately knew what it would be about: getting the player to be scared of their own shadow. None of the scares are actually real, but the player doesn't know that right away. We scrapped the anthology idea, but this level worked so well that we kept it. One aspect we wanted to explore and draw from was movie scene cuts. Basically, how a match cut in a movie might make sense in a game. This next moment is a good example. Carefully watch the cloud in the distance. You'll see that it cuts to a new scene.
Boo. 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 Boo.
Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce, and I'd like to talk more about the feelings of worthlessness and self-doubt I mentioned before. You feel this way because you want the kind of happy life you see all around you, the kind you know everyone else is enjoying. And that's exactly why we're here to help.
Warning. You were advised to subject yourself to explosive mental overload by descending into additional dreams, but have now descended
The object used in this puzzle was originally a flashlight, but unfortunately, because of how the mechanic works, it always placed the flashlight at the end of the room, which is not a particularly useful position for a flashlight. We tried a couple of things, but finally decided to switch to an object that could glow from both ends.
Did you know that unintentional multi-dream layering occurs in less than 1% of patients? This correlates strongly with the 99% of patients who are able to follow simple instructions from the standard orientation protocol.
When I prototyped this part, there was going to be a shadow of a monster on the wall that turned out to be a bunch of random objects when the lights turned on. The shadow always looked silly though, so eventually the reveal became the blood actually being red paint.
Biggest technical challenges we had in the game.
Originally, this was one huge room, but turning our dynamic lights all on abruptly killed the frame rate, so we ended up chopping the room into smaller areas so we could hide and unhide objects from the player's view once the lights turned back on. This would lessen the amount of objects getting hit by lights at the given time, thus saving on performance.
Yeah, I remember Phil even tried teleporting the player to a completely new room, but that change-up was a bit too visually obvious, and we eventually realized that chopping up the room was the answer.
We wanted to do a unique alarm clock for each level, but this is the only one that survived that idea.
Part of breaking expectations is changing your definition of an object. A door, which usually keeps people out, becomes a flight of stairs if it is cloned enough times.
Attention! Dr. Pierce requires you to note the following risks of dream overexposure. Significant memory loss, both quantitative and qualitative. Hallucinations of dreaded or annoying objects. Unrealistic beliefs about the lengths of hallways. And other side effects which have not yet been discovered or which cannot be understood.
Yeah, so this right-click to return sign that I bet you didn't even notice is one of the most unread signs in the game. It comes up later, and it's also one of the most unread signs in the game there too.
Let's talk about the smiley face. Because our goal was to break people's expectations, we prototyped a lot of weird moments like these. Some of them didn't work because they felt too meta. They would actually take people out of the game experience. This one, however, stayed because it was just subtle enough and playful enough that you could see it as a bout of insanity.
Aside from the core resizing mechanic, I think cloning the objects is one of the more immediately enjoyable mechanics that we put into the game. When we ran playtests, this one would always have people smiling.
Warning. Dr. Pierce is frantically submitting numerous spelling and grammar mistakes into the standard orientation protocol in a desperate attempt to counsel you. I have no subroutine to correct these errors, but I cannot compromise the integrity of the standard orientation protocol. You will not receive these messages. They would not make sense regardless.